baby on the brink of death, a warrior chief shattered by loss, and a widow whose grief has emptied her soul, but whose body still holds life. When these three paths collide in the harsh wilderness of the American frontier, something extraordinary happens, and none of them will ever be the same again. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. The Arizona Territory stretched endlessly beneath a merciless sun, its red rocks shimmering in waves of heat that made the horizon dance like water. It was the summer of 1876, and the land belonged to those strong enough to claim it. Among the mesas and canyons, the Chiricahua Apache had made their home for generations, moving like shadows through terrain that would kill a white man in days. Chief Dakota sat alone in his dwelling, a structure of buffalo hide and wooden poles that provided little comfort against the weight pressing on his chest. In his arms lay his infant son, barely 3 months old, wrapped in soft deerskin. The baby's cries had grown weaker over the past 2 days, and Dakota's heart clenched with a fear he had never known in battle. His wife, Ayasha, had died bringing this child into the world, her last breath a whispered prayer that their son would grow strong. Now that son refused to drink from the wet nurses, turning his tiny face away from every woman who tried to feed him. Dakota was a man of 30 winters, tall and powerfully built, with shoulders broadened by years of hunting and warfare. His face was striking, with high cheekbones and intense dark eyes that could pierce through a man's soul. Long black hair fell past his shoulders, adorned with eagle feathers that marked his status. He had led his people through conflicts with Mexican soldiers and American cavalry alike, never showing weakness, never admitting defeat. But now, holding his dying son, he felt utterly powerless. The baby whimpered, a sound so fragile it made Dakota's warrior heart crack. He had named the boy Chayton, meaning falcon, hoping he would soar above the troubles of their world. But Chayton was fading, his small body growing lighter each day, his skin losing its healthy tone. Outside, the village continued its daily rhythm. Women prepared meals over cooking fires. Their conversations carried on the dry wind. Children played between the dwellings, their laughter a stark contrast to the silence in Dakota's home. Warriors returned from scouting parties, reporting movement of cavalry patrols to the east. Life moved forward, but for Dakota, time had stopped. Mahala, one of the elder women, entered without announcement. She was the tribe's healer, her knowledge of herbs and remedies passed down through generations. Her weathered face showed concern as she approached the chief. "The child still refuses?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Dakota nodded, unable to trust his voice. Mahala had tried everything. Different women had attempted to nurse Chayton. They had prepared broths and teas. Nothing worked. The baby would cry and turn away, growing weaker with each passing hour. "There may be one possibility," Mahala said slowly, her voice careful. "The white woman we captured last week. She was found near the burned wagon. She had recently given birth." Dakota's jaw tightened. The raid had been necessary, a response to settlers encroaching on Apache hunting grounds. They had found the wagon train after another war party had attacked it. Most were dead, but they had taken a few captives, including a young white woman clutching a bundle. The bundle had been her baby, already dead, likely from the attack or the harsh journey. The woman had been in shock, barely responsive, and Dakota had ordered her kept under guard in a separate dwelling at the village's edge. "She is white," Dakota said, the words heavy with centuries of conflict and distrust. "She is a mother who has lost her child," Mahala replied, "and your son is dying. Pride is a luxury we cannot afford right now, Chief." The words struck deep. Dakota looked down at Chayton, whose breathing had become shallow. The baby's lips were dry, his tiny fists clenched weakly. How much time did they have? A day? Less? "Bring her," Dakota said finally, the command costing him more than any he had given in battle. Mahala left quickly, and Dakota sat alone with his thoughts. He had fought white men, had seen what their westward expansion meant for his people. Treaties broken, land stolen, buffalo slaughtered for sport. His hatred for them was earned through blood and betrayal. Yet now he would ask one of them to save his son's life. The irony was not lost on him. Minutes felt like hours before Mahala returned with the white woman. Takoda's breath caught despite himself. She was younger than he expected, perhaps 25, with long auburn hair that caught the light filtering through the dwelling's opening. Her face, though marked by grief and exhaustion, held a delicate beauty that seemed out of place in this harsh land. She wore a torn calico dress, dusty and stained from her ordeal. Her green eyes were red from crying, but they held a strength that surprised him. Her name was Rebecca Hayes, though Takoda did not know this yet. She had been traveling west with her husband Thomas, seeking a new life in California. They had been married only 2 years, and their daughter Emma had been born just weeks before they joined the wagon train. Rebecca had been a school teacher in Pennsylvania, educated and refined, completely unprepared for the brutality of frontier life. The attack had happened so fast. One moment they were traveling peacefully, the next there was gunfire and screaming. Thomas had been shot trying to protect them. Emma, her precious baby girl with Thomas's blue eyes, had been struck by a stray bullet. Rebecca had held her daughter as she died, her world ending in that moment. When Takoda's warriors had found the wagon train, Rebecca had been sitting in the dust, holding Emma's body, beyond tears, beyond fear. They had taken her because Mahala had recognized that she had recently given birth, thinking she might be useful. Rebecca had not fought. She had not cared what happened to her. Everything that mattered was gone. Now she stood before this Apache chief, trying to understand what was being asked of her. Mahala spoke to her in broken English, pointing to the baby in Takoda's arms. Rebecca's eyes widened as she understood. The baby was starving. They wanted her to nurse him. Every instinct told her to refuse. These people had taken everything from her. But then, she looked at the infant, saw how small and helpless he was, and her body betrayed her. Her breasts ached with milk meant for Emma. Her arms felt empty without a child to hold. And despite everything, despite the hatred and grief churning inside her, she could not let an innocent baby die. She stepped forward slowly, extending her arms. Takoda hesitated, his proud warriors bearing stiff with reluctance. To hand his son to this white woman, to trust her with the most precious thing in his life, went against everything he believed. But Chaitan's weak cry decided him. He stood and carefully placed his son in Rebecca's arms. The moment Rebecca held Chaitan, something shifted in the dwelling. Her maternal instincts, dormant since Emma's death, surged forward. She sat down naturally, cradling the baby close, and began to nurse him. The dwelling fell silent except for the soft sounds of the infant finally feeding. Takoda watched, his powerful frame tense, ready to snatch his son back at the first sign of danger. But Rebecca was gentle, her touch careful and practiced. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked down at the baby, seeing Emma's face, remembering what she had lost. Yet she also felt something else, something she thought had died with her daughter. Purpose. This child needed her. Chaitan drank eagerly, his tiny hands grasping at Rebecca's dress. Color began to return to his face almost immediately. Rebecca hummed softly, an old lullaby her mother had sung to her, the melody filling the space between captor and captive, between cultures separated by violence and misunderstanding. Takoda found himself unable to look away from this woman. She was the enemy, representative of everything threatening his people's existence. Yet here she was, giving life to his son when his own people could not. Her tears spoke of a mother's love, a pain he understood too well. In that moment, she was not white or Apache. She was simply a grieving mother holding a hungry child. Mahala watched with satisfaction, then quietly left, giving them privacy. The afternoon sun shifted, casting long shadows across the dwelling. Rebecca continued to nurse Chaitan, lost in memories of her own daughter, while Takoda struggled with emotions he could not name. Gratitude mixed with resentment, hope tangled with suspicion. Finally, Chaitan fell asleep, milk-drunk and content. His small body relaxed in Rebecca's arms. She looked up at Takoda, meeting his eyes for the first time. Neither spoke, but something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the strange circumstances that had brought them to this moment. "His name?" Rebecca asked softly, her voice hoarse from disuse. Takoda understood the question, though her language was foreign to his tongue. "Chaitan," he said, the word careful and deliberate. Rebecca nodded, looking down at the sleeping infant. "He's beautiful," she whispered, more to herself than to Dakota. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, Rebecca remained in the chief's dwelling, holding his son, both of them prisoners of circumstance, neither knowing that this moment would change everything. The days that followed established a rhythm neither Rebecca nor Dakota had anticipated. Each morning, Mahala would escort Rebecca to the chief's dwelling where Chayton waited, hungry and fussing. Each time, Rebecca would take the baby in her arms and nurse him, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously with every moment. Chayton thrived under her care, gaining weight, his cries growing stronger and more demanding, his eyes brighter with each passing day. Dakota found reasons to remain present during these feedings. He told himself it was to protect his son, to ensure the white woman did not harm Chayton. But truthfully, he was drawn to watch her, fascinated by the tenderness in her touch, the soft songs she sang in her strange language, the way her face softened when she looked at his son. He began to see past the color of her skin, past the threat her people represented, and saw instead a woman carrying an unbearable grief with quiet dignity. On the 5th day, as Rebecca settled into her usual spot to nurse Chayton, Dakota spoke. His English was limited, learned from occasional trading encounters and captured soldiers, but he managed to form the question that had burned in his mind. "Your baby?" he asked, his voice rough with the unfamiliar language. Rebecca's hands trembled, but she did not look up from Chayton. "Dead," she whispered. "Shot during the attack. She was only 6 weeks old. Her name was Emma." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with shared understanding. Dakota sat down across from her, his imposing frame somehow less intimidating in that moment. "My wife," he said slowly, searching for the English words. "She die. Baby come, she go." Their eyes met, and in that exchange something fundamental shifted. They were not captor and captive in that moment. They were two people who had lost everything, who understood the particular pain of burying those they loved most. Rebecca's tears fell silently, dropping onto Chayton's soft black hair, while Dakota felt his carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "I am sorry," Rebecca said, her voice barely audible. "For your wife, for your loss." Dakota nodded, surprised by the sincerity in her tone. "I am sorry," he replied, the words awkward but genuine. "For your baby, for your man." From that day forward, something changed between them. Dakota began to stay in the dwelling during Rebecca's visits, and they started to communicate through a mixture of English, Apache, and gestures. He taught her words in his language. She taught him phrases in hers. They spoke of small things at first, the weather, the baby's progress, but gradually they shared more. Rebecca told him about Pennsylvania, about teaching children to read, about her dreams of a better life in California. Dakota spoke of his childhood, of learning to hunt with his father, of the old ways before the white men came in such numbers. They discovered unexpected common ground in their love of the land, though they saw it through different eyes. Rebecca appreciated its harsh beauty, while Dakota saw it as sacred, a gift from the Creator. The village noticed the change. Warriors muttered about their chief spending too much time with the white captive. Women whispered about the inappropriate attachment forming, but Mahala, wise in the ways of the heart, said nothing. She had seen the light return to Dakota's eyes, had watched Rebecca begin to heal from her grief. Sometimes, she thought, the Creator worked in mysterious ways. 2 weeks after Rebecca first nursed Chayton, trouble arrived. A group of warriors led by Maska, a fierce fighter who had long desired to be chief, returned from a raid with disturbing news. American cavalry soldiers were camping just 2 days' ride to the east, and they were asking about captives, specifically about a white woman with red hair. The council gathered that evening, the men sitting in a circle around the central fire. Dakota listened as Maska spoke, his voice aggressive and challenging. "The soldiers will come here," Maska declared, his scarred face fierce in the firelight. "They will attack our village to retrieve the white woman. We should kill her now. Eliminate the reason for their pursuit." Several warriors nodded in agreement. The tension in the air was palpable, dangerous. Dakota felt his chest tighten. The logical part of his mind knew Maska was right, Rebecca's presence endangered them all, but the thought of harming her, of taking Chaitin's source of life, filled him with a resistance he could not fully explain. "She cares for my son," Dakota said firmly. "Chaitin lives because of her. We do not kill those who save our children." "Your attachment to this white woman clouds your judgment," Masca countered, standing to face Dakota directly. "You forget who our enemies are. Her people kill our families, steal our land, break every promise they make. She is one of them." "She is a mother who lost her child," Dakota replied, rising to his full height, his presence commanding. "She has shown Chaitin more care than any warrior shows his enemies." The argument continued, voices rising, hands moving to weapons. Finally, Dakota made his decision. "We will move the village north, into the mountains. The terrain will make it difficult for cavalry to follow. We leave at dawn." Masca's eyes narrowed. "And the woman?" "She comes with us. My son still needs her." The answer satisfied no one, but Dakota's word was law. The council dispersed, tension unresolved, and Dakota returned to his dwelling where Rebecca sat with Chaitin, unaware of the danger swirling around her. When Dakota entered, Rebecca looked up, immediately sensing his troubled mood. Chaitin slept peacefully in her arms, and she had been singing softly, her voice carrying a melancholy tune about home and lost love. "Something is wrong," she said, not a question but a statement. Dakota sat down heavily, the weight of leadership pressing on his shoulders. He looked at her for a long moment, this white woman who had become so integral to his son's survival, and realized with startling clarity that somewhere along the way, she had become important to him as well. Not just as Chaitin's nurse, but as a person, as a woman whose strength and grace had captured his attention despite every reason to remain distant. "Soldiers come," he said finally. "Looking for you. We must move." Rebecca's face paled. The thought of rescue should have brought relief, but instead she felt conflicted. Return to what? Her husband was dead. Her daughter was dead. Her dreams of California were ashes. And here, despite being a captive, she had found purpose again in caring for Chaitin. She had found, against all logic and expectation, a connection with this Apache chief who had shown her more respect in 2 weeks than many white men had shown in her lifetime. "What will happen to Chaitin if I leave?" she asked quietly. Dakota's jaw tightened. "He needs you still, but soldiers will not stop. They will attack to take you back." "Then I will not go," Rebecca said, the words surprising even herself. Dakota stared at her. "You choose to stay? With Apache? With enemies of your people?" Rebecca looked down at Chaitin, then back at Dakota, her green eyes meeting his dark ones with unwavering resolve. "My people are dead. This child is alive because I am here. That matters more than anything else." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended language and culture. Dakota reached out slowly, his large hand covering hers where it rested on Chaitin's small body. The touch was brief but electric, charging the air between them with possibility. "You are brave," Dakota said softly, his English careful, but his meaning clear. "More brave than many warriors." Rebecca felt her breath catch. She had not been touched with gentleness since Thomas died. The warmth of Dakota's hand, the admiration in his eyes, stirred something inside her she thought had died with her family. Guilt immediately followed. How could she feel anything for this man? He was Apache. His people had been there when her family died. Yet he had also shown her kindness, had trusted her with his most precious treasure, had seen her as a person rather than just a captive. The night before the village moved, Rebecca could not sleep. She lay in the small dwelling where she was kept, staring at the hide walls, thinking about the impossible situation she found herself in. She had made the choice to stay, but what did that truly mean? Could she really build a life here among people whose language she barely spoke, whose customs were foreign, whose way of life was so different from everything she had known? Yet when she thought of leaving, of never seeing Chaitin again, of never seeing Dakota again, her heart ached in a way that frightened her. She had only known them for 2 weeks, but they had become her anchor in a world that had capsized. Chaitin needed her, yes, but she was beginning to realize that she needed them too. Meanwhile, Dakota sat outside his dwelling, looking at the stars, wrestling with his own demons. He had been taught from childhood that white people were the enemy, that they could not be trusted, that they brought only destruction. Yet Rebecca had shattered those beliefs simply by being who she was. She was kind, strong, intelligent, and devoted to his son. When he looked at her, he no longer saw a white woman. He saw Rebecca, and that realization terrified him. He thought of Ayesha, his wife, and felt the familiar pang of grief. But it was softer now, more memory than open wound. Would Ayesha want him to remain alone, to raise Chaitin without a mother's love? He knew the answer. Ayesha had been practical, fierce, and devoted to family above all else. She would want Chaitin to thrive. She would want Dakota to find happiness again, even if it came from an unexpected source. The village moved before dawn, a silent procession of families carrying their lives on horses and travois. The journey into the mountains was arduous, following ancient paths known only to the Apache, winding through canyons where cavalry horses would stumble and break their legs. Rebecca rode behind Dakota, holding Chaitin close to her chest, the baby wrapped securely against the morning chill. She had never ridden this way before, balanced on a horse with no saddle, trusting entirely in Dakota's guidance as they navigated treacherous terrain. Masca rode at the rear with several warriors, his eyes constantly watching Rebecca with undisguised hostility. He had made his position clear. The white woman was a threat, a weakness in their chief's armor that would bring destruction upon them all. Several warriors shared his view, their resentment simmering beneath the surface of forced obedience to Dakota's command. 3 days into their journey, as they made camp in a high valley surrounded by pine trees and rocky outcroppings, the tension finally erupted. Rebecca had just finished nursing Chaitin and was returning him to Dakota when Masca stepped into their path, blocking her way. Several warriors stood behind him, their faces hard and unforgiving. "This cannot continue," Masca declared in Apache, his voice carrying across the camp. "Our chief has forgotten his duty to his people because of his desire for a white woman." Dakota's hand moved to the knife at his belt, his entire body coiling like a spring ready to release. "Choose your next words carefully, Masca. You challenge my honor." "I challenge your judgment," Masca shot back. "Everyone sees how you look at her. You have forgotten Ayesha. You betray her memory with this white devil who belongs to the people, destroying our way of life." Rebecca did not understand all the words, but she understood the tone, the anger, the accusation. She held Chaitin tighter, her heart racing as she realized this confrontation had been building since the day she arrived. Mahala appeared at her side, taking Chaitin from her arms and moving away quickly, protecting the baby from whatever was about to unfold. Dakota stepped forward, his impressive frame seeming to grow larger with barely contained rage. "You dare speak of my wife? You know nothing of honor or memory. Rebecca saved my son's life. She chose to stay when she could have sought rescue. She has shown more courage than you have shown wisdom." "She has bewitched you," Masca spat. "The spirits speak against this. Our ancestors curse this union you desire. Send her away or I will challenge you for leadership of our people." The camp fell absolutely silent. A challenge for chieftainship was a serious matter, often settled through combat, to the death if necessary. Dakota's eyes narrowed, calculating, weighing his options. He could fight Masca, could probably defeat him, but that would leave scars in the tribe that might never heal. It would divide his people at a time when they needed unity against external threats. Rebecca watched Dakota's face, saw the conflict there, and made her decision. She stepped forward, her voice clear despite her fear. "Stop, please. I will go." Dakota turned to her sharply. "No." "Yes," Rebecca insisted, switching to the Apache words he had taught her, wanting everyone to understand. "I bring trouble. Chaitin is strong now. He can drink from others. I will not cause war among your people." "You think any other woman can feed my son now?" Dakota's voice was rough with emotion. "You think this is only about milk?" He turned to face his people, addressing the entire camp, his voice ringing with authority. "This woman is not our enemy. She grieves as we grieve. She has lost her family as we have lost ours. She cares for my son not because she is forced, but because she chooses compassion over hatred. If we cannot see that, if we let our anger blind us to the humanity in others, then we are no better than those who hunt us." Maska laughed bitterly. Pretty words, but they will not stop the soldiers who come. They will not feed our children when the buffalo are gone, and the white men claim all the land. Your heart has made you weak, Dakota. My heart has made me see clearly, Dakota countered. He looked at Rebecca, and in that moment, before his entire tribe, he made his choice. He took her hand, the gesture shocking everyone present. I care for this woman, not because she is my son's nurse, but because she is brave and kind and strong. I see in her what I saw in Ayasha. The spirits do not curse this. They have brought her to us for a reason. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rebecca's eyes widened, her hand trembling in Dakota's grasp. He was declaring his feelings publicly, risking everything for her. The weight of that sacrifice was almost unbearable. Maska's face contorted with fury. Then you are no longer fit to lead. I challenge you, Dakota. Tomorrow at sunrise, the winner leads. The loser leaves or dies. The challenge was made, witnessed by all. There was no taking it back. Dakota released Rebecca's hand and nodded slowly. I accept. Tomorrow, we settle this. That night, Rebecca could not eat, could not rest. She sat with Chayton holding the baby close, her mind racing with guilt and fear. Mahala came to sit beside her, the old woman's presence comforting despite the language barrier that still existed between them. He fights for you tomorrow, Mahala said in careful English. You understand this? I never asked him to, Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. I never wanted anyone to be hurt because of me. Love does not ask permission, Mahala replied wisely. It comes like the storm, changing everything. Dakota's heart has been dead since Ayasha left this world. You brought it back to life. That is a gift, not a curse. But if he loses, if he dies, Mahala's weathered hand covered Rebecca's. Then you will honor his sacrifice by living fully, by raising his son with the courage he saw in you. But I do not think he will lose. Dakota fights not just for his position or for you, but for the future he sees. A future where hatred does not rule every choice. Rebecca looked down at Chayton, sleeping peacefully in her arms, innocent and unaware of the violence his existence had sparked. She thought of Thomas, of the life she had planned, of the dreams that had died in the desert. Then she thought of Dakota, of his strength tempered with gentleness, of the way he looked at her as though she was precious, of how he had defended her before his entire tribe. When had her feelings for him shifted from gratitude to something deeper? She could not pinpoint the exact moment, but she knew with absolute certainty that the thought of him dying tomorrow was unbearable. Dakota spent the night preparing, checking his weapons, focusing his mind. He did not doubt his ability to defeat Maska in combat. He was faster, stronger, more experienced, but he understood what this fight truly represented. It was not just about Rebecca or about leadership. It was about the soul of his people, about whether they could adapt and survive in a changing world, or whether they would be consumed by hatred and rigid thinking. Before dawn, Rebecca went to him. She found him sitting alone, watching the stars fade as the sky began to lighten. She approached slowly, Chayton asleep against her shoulder, and sat beside him without speaking. For several minutes they simply existed together in the quiet, two people balanced on the edge of something that would forever alter their lives. You do not have to do this, Rebecca finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can leave. I can find the soldiers. You can keep your people together. Dakota turned to her, his hand reaching up to cup her face with surprising tenderness. You do not understand, he said, his English improving with emotion. I have been dead inside since Ayasha left me. I lived only for Chayton, only for duty. Then you came. You brought light back. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to want something beyond survival. I do not fight just for you. I fight for the man I want to be, the leader my people need, the father Chayton deserves. Rebecca leaned into his touch, her own hand covering his. I am frightened, she admitted. So am I, Dakota confessed, but not of Maska. I am frightened of what I feel for you. It is too fast, too unexpected, but it is real. As real as the sun that rises. I feel it too, Rebecca whispered. I do not understand it. I should hate your people. I should want only to escape. But when I think of leaving, of never seeing you again, my heart breaks all over again." Dakota pulled her close, careful not to wake Chayton between them, and pressed his forehead to hers in a gesture of intimacy that transcended cultural differences. They stayed that way until the sun crested the horizon, drawing strength from each other for the trial ahead. The entire village gathered in a clearing as morning light flooded the valley. Maska stood ready, his body lean and scarred from countless battles, his eyes burning with righteous fury. Dakota faced him, his powerful frame relaxed but ready, his expression calm and focused. Rebecca stood with Mahala and the other women, holding Chayton, her heart in her throat. The fight was brutal and swift. Maska attacked first, his knife flashing in the morning sun, seeking vulnerable spots with practiced precision. Dakota deflected, parried, his movements economical and efficient. They circled each other, testing, probing for weakness. Blood was drawn on both sides, shallow cuts that marked their arms and torsos. The watching crowd remained silent, tension thick enough to taste. Then Maska overextended, his hatred making him reckless, and Dakota saw his opportunity. He moved with the fluid grace of a hunting cat, disarming Maska and bringing him to the ground, his knife pressed to his opponent's throat. The fight was over. Dakota had won, but he did not kill. Instead, he spoke loud enough for all to hear. "You are a strong warrior, Maska. Our people need your strength. I do not wish your death, I wish your understanding. Will you accept my leadership? Will you accept that our survival depends on wisdom, not just on warfare?" Maska's chest heaved with exertion and frustrated rage, but he was not stupid. He had lost fairly. To continue fighting would mean death, and despite everything, he valued his life. Slowly, grudgingly, he nodded. "I accept. You have proven yourself the stronger, but I do not have to agree with your choices. I ask only for your loyalty, not your agreement," Dakota replied, offering his hand to help Maska stand. The gesture was noted by all, a demonstration of strength and mercy combined. The challenge was over. Dakota's position was secure, and as he turned to look at Rebecca, seeing the relief and joy on her face, he knew that the hardest battle had been won. The days that followed brought gradual acceptance. The tribe saw that Dakota's feelings for Rebecca did not weaken him, but rather gave him renewed purpose. They saw how she cared for Chayton, how she learned their language with diligence, how she helped the women with their tasks without complaint. Slowly, grudgingly, they began to see her as Dakota saw her, not as a white woman, but simply as Rebecca. 3 weeks after the challenge, as autumn began to paint the mountains in shades of gold and red, Dakota asked Rebecca to walk with him. They left Chayton with Mahala and climbed to a ridge overlooking the valley where their village was spread out below. The view was breathtaking, the kind of wild beauty that reminded Rebecca why she had wanted to come west in the first place. "I have thought much about the future," Dakota began, his English now noticeably improved through constant practice with Rebecca. "About what life can be for Chayton, for our people, for us. And what have you concluded?" Rebecca asked, her heart beginning to race. Dakota turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I have concluded that the spirits brought you to me for a reason. You saved my son's life. You saved my life too, in a different way. You showed me that it is possible to move beyond hatred, to find connection even where we expect only enmity." "Dakota," Rebecca breathed, knowing what was coming, wanting it and fearing it in equal measure. "In my culture, when a man wishes to join his life with a woman's, he speaks his intention plainly. He offers what he can give. He asks for what he hopes to receive." Dakota's voice was steady, but his eyes showed his vulnerability. "I can offer you a life that will not be easy. I can offer you a son who already loves you as a mother. I can offer you my heart, which I thought was dead but which you have brought back to life. I can offer you my protection, my respect, my devotion. I ask only that you stay, not as a captive but as my wife, as Chayton's mother, as my partner in facing whatever comes." Tears streamed down Rebecca's face, but they were not tears of sorrow. She had lost everything, had been broken and remade in the crucible of grief and unexpected love. Standing before this man, This Apache chief who had shown her a depth of humanity she had not expected to find. She realized that sometimes life's greatest gifts came wrapped in the most unlikely packages. "Yes," she said simply, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I will stay. Yes, I will be your wife. Yes, I will be Chaitan's mother. I choose this life, Dakota. I choose you." Dakota pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she was the most precious thing in the world. And for him, she was. They stood on that ridge as the sun moved across the sky. Two people from different worlds who had found in each other something worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. The wedding ceremony took place a week later, blending Apache traditions with Rebecca's Christian beliefs in a way that honored both their pasts while creating something new. Mahala officiated, speaking words of blessing that transcended language. The tribe attended, even Maska, though he stood at the back with his arms crossed. But he was there, and that was what mattered. Unity, however imperfect, was better than division. Rebecca wore a dress made of soft deerskin, decorated with beadwork that the women of the tribe had created for her, a gesture of acceptance that moved her to tears. Dakota wore his finest war shirt, his hair adorned with eagle feathers, his bearing proud and strong. Chaitan was held by Mahala during the ceremony, the baby cooing happily, seeming to understand that something important and good was happening. As the seasons changed and winter approached, the small family settled into their new life together. Rebecca fully embraced her role as Chaitan's mother, teaching him words in both English and Apache as he grew, singing him songs from both cultures, ensuring he would understand the richness of his heritage. Dakota proved to be a devoted husband, patient with her as she learned the ways of his people, protective without being possessive, loving with a depth that sometimes took her breath away. The threat of cavalry pursuit faded as the soldiers gave up their search, assuming Rebecca had died in the desert, along with so many others. The tribe thrived in their mountain home, hunting elk and deer, gathering berries and roots, living according to the old ways while slowly, carefully, beginning to adapt to the reality that their world was changing, and they would need to change with it if they were to survive. One evening, nearly a year after Rebecca had first arrived in the Apache camp, she sat with Dakota outside their dwelling, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Chaitan played at their feet, now a healthy, happy toddler with his father's dark eyes and his mother's curious spirit. Rebecca leaned against Dakota's strong shoulder, her hand resting on her own swollen belly where their second child grew, a daughter they would name Emma, honoring the past while embracing the future. "Are you happy?" Dakota asked, his arm around her waist, his voice soft and intimate. Rebecca looked at their son, felt the life growing inside her, thought about the man beside her who had given her a reason to live again. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the terrible losses and unexpected gains, the grief that had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. "Yes," she answered, turning to kiss him gently. "I am home." And in that moment, surrounded by mountains and sky, held in the arms of a man she had never expected to love, raising a child she had never expected to mother, Rebecca Hayes, now Rebecca, wife of Chief Dakota, knew that sometimes the most amazing journeys begin in the darkest moments, and that love, real love, can bridge any divide, heal any wound, and create families that transcend the boundaries humans try to impose. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Dakota held both his wife and his son close, his heart full in a way he had thought impossible after Ayasha's death. Rebecca had not replaced his first wife. She had instead created something new, a love different but equally profound, proving that the human heart has an infinite capacity for connection, if only we are brave enough to open ourselves to possibility. Their story became legend among the Apache, told around fires for generations. The story of the white widow who saved the chief's son and in doing so saved them all, teaching them that humanity